The Roman Empire didn't fall to barbarians. It fell to its own financial system. In the year 274 AD, Roman Emperor Aurelian faced a rebellion, not from barbarian hordes, not from foreign armies, from his own mint workers. The men who physically stamped Roman coins launched an armed uprising in the heart of Rome itself, and thousands died in the streets before it was crushed. Why would coin makers go to war against their own emperor? Because Aurelian threatened to expose what they'd been doing for decades, systematically hollowing out the silver in Roman currency and pocketing the difference. The men who made the money were stealing the empire, one coin at a time. And the terrifying part? They weren't the ones who started it. The Roman government was. Every empire that ever collapsed had one thing in common: not a weak military, not a bad leader. Every empire that collapsed debased its currency first. And Rome didn't just debase its currency. Rome turned currency debasement into an art form that funded the largest empire the ancient world had ever seen, until it consumed everything. Follow the money. At its peak, Rome controlled over 2 million square miles of territory. 60 million people lived under its authority. It maintained a standing army of roughly 400,000 soldiers, and every single one of them expected to be paid in silver. The Roman denarius, a small silver coin, was the engine of empire. Soldiers were paid in denarii. Taxes were collected in denarii. Trade across 3 continents moved on the back of this single coin, and its value rested on one promise: that each denarius contained a specific weight of real silver. For centuries, that promise held. Under Augustus, the first emperor, the denarius was roughly 95% pure silver, trusted from Britain to Babylon. Roman coins have been found as far as India and Vietnam because merchants everywhere accepted them. They knew what they were getting. The silver content was the contract. No signature required. But here's where the manipulation begins. Rome had a spending problem that would make modern governments blush. The legions demanded pay. The citizens demanded grain. The emperors demanded monuments, games, and bribes to keep the Praetorian Guard loyal. And the empire's silver mines, particularly in Spain, were producing less and less each decade. The gap between what Rome needed to spend and what Rome actually had was growing wider every single year. So some emperor, historians debate exactly who crossed the line first, but Nero gets the most blame, discovered something brilliant and catastrophic. You could take the same amount of silver, melt it down, mix in cheaper base metals like copper, and stamp out more coins. The coins looked the same. They spent the same. But each one contained less actual silver. Overnight, without raising a single tax, without conquering a single new territory, Rome had more money. The history books called it fiscal policy. The financial records tell a different story. Under Nero, around 64 AD, the silver content of the denarius dropped from 95% to roughly 93%. A small shave, almost undetectable. But the precedent was set. Under Trajan, it fell to 85%. Under Marcus Aurelius, 75%. Under Septimius Severus, 50%. And by the time of Gallienus in the 260s, the denarius, the coin that had unified the known world, contained less than 5% silver, a copper coin wearing a thin silver costume. Think about that for a second. Each time an emperor reduced the silver content, he was effectively taxing every single person who held Roman currency. Your coins bought less. Your savings eroded. The purchasing power was being silently transferred from the citizens to the state. No vote was taken. No announcement was made. People simply woke up one day and realized that a bag of coins that once bought a month of grain now barely covered a week. Here's the thing. Currency debasement is a tax that requires no legislation. It's invisible theft, conducted in slow motion, and by the time the population understands what's happening, it's already too late. And who profited from this slow-motion robbery? Follow the money to the top. The emperors spent first. They received the newly minted, debased coins before prices adjusted. They paid their soldiers, funded their wars, built their palaces, all with money that was worth more in the moment of spending than it would be worth a month later when prices caught up. The people at the top of the system always spend debased currency first. The people at the bottom always feel the inflation last. And worst. Roman merchants began refusing coins. Provincial economies started bartering. The vast trade networks that connected the empire began to fracture because nobody trusted the money anymore. By the 3rd century, Rome was experiencing what economic historians call the crisis of the 3rd century, and money was at the center of all of it. In a 50-year period, over 25 different men claimed the title of emperor. The empire fractured into 3 competing states, and the common thread linking every crisis, every civil war, every fracture? The government could no longer pay for anything with money anyone believed in. Soldiers who weren't paid in real value deserted or switched allegiance. Provinces that saw their wealth evaporating stopped sending taxes to Rome. The entire apparatus of imperial control depended on a financial instrument that the government itself had destroyed. Diocletian tried to fix it. He issued his famous edict on maximum prices in 301 AD, essentially imposing price controls across the entire empire with the death penalty for violations. It failed spectacularly. You cannot legislate trust back into a currency. Constantine shifted the empire to a new gold coin, the solidus, which held its value. But only the wealthy had access to gold. The common citizen was left holding worthless bronze, and the economic divide between rich and poor became a chasm that no policy could bridge. The barbarians who eventually sacked Rome in 476 AD were walking through a door that had been opened decades earlier by monetary collapse. The legions that should have stopped them, already dissolved because their pay was worthless. The frontier defenses that should have held, unmanned because the provinces that funded them had economically seceded. The political unity that should have rallied a response, shattered along the same fault lines as the financial system. The barbarians did not defeat the Roman Empire. They collected the pieces after Rome's own monetary policy broke it apart. Now here's where this stops being ancient history and starts being something else entirely. The United States dollar was backed by gold until 1971. Since then, the money supply has expanded by over 4,000%. The purchasing power of $1 in 1971 is now worth roughly 7 cents. Every major government on Earth finances its operations partly through monetary expansion, creating new money that dilutes the value of existing money. The mechanism is more sophisticated than shaving silver off a coin, but the principle is identical. Spend now, dilute later, and hope the population doesn't do the math. And that's where it gets strange. Rome's financial trick worked for over 200 years. That's the dangerous part. It worked long enough for everyone to believe it was sustainable. Long enough for the people running the system to convince themselves they could always shave just a little more. Long enough for an entire civilization to become dependent on a lie about the value of the money in their hands. The question isn't whether modern economies have learned from Rome. The question is whether they learned the lesson, or just the technique. If this changed how you see the history behind your money, a like goes a long way in helping more people find stories that don't get told in textbooks. And if you want to keep following the money through history's biggest power plays, subscribe to this channel because we're just getting started. Next time someone tells you an empire fell because of politics or military failure, remember this: check the currency first. The money always tells the real story.